Lyle Bell is a career artist. That's a literal use of the word artist. The sum of his creative output is not restricted to music, to album cycles, but instead to producing multiple musical projects at once: the music, the art, the costumes, the videos, some escaping regional landlocked to a greater audience, and some that do not. But also his painting and photography work. He's an incredible live music photographer. Most careers are tempered with a mindless day job to pay bills, not a blossoming secondary artistic talent. Most careers might feature one band, one project that hits a peak and crosses over into some version of measurable success. Lyle has had three, or five, depending on your definition of such: Molly's Reach, Slow Fresh Oil, Whitey Houston, Shout Out 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 Out, The Wet Secrets. The Wet Secrets produced three full-length albums and an EP between 2007 and 2017, won 100 grand in the Peak Performance Project, signed with Six Shooter Records, and became infamous for their performances in bright red marching band uniforms. Shout Out 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 was a Juno-nominated dance punk electro band producing three full-length albums and a bunch of singles and collabs between 2006 2012, showing up on soundtracks like Mass Effect 3, which was massive. So the cliche of everything he touches turns to gold might actually be true, except for his own perception that none of those projects ever quite crested the wave of enough fame or enough money or whatever. His own initial admission is, "I am still in the trenches." This is the life of the indie rock star, maybe. Back when music always came with packaging, an enthusiast would enthusiastically scour the liner notes of a band's new record, absorbing all the names and the instruments and the producers and the equipment, sowing the seeds of indie music snobs who knew when the bassist of this band also plays bass in that band, who play with the little sister of the drummer of the other band that the bassist started with. That's Lyle Bell. He's the guy threaded through the music snob's mental encyclopedia. Every town has a local hero. I think every town has a Lyle. Needs a Lyle. My name is Glenn Erickson. This is Almost Famous Enough. Thanks for spending your time with us. This is Lyle Bell. Live with Lyle Bell.
Well, I'm glad
Live.
that wasn't recorded. Oh, spicy intro.
Yeah, crazy preambles. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me, Lyle. Lyle Bell of
Yeah.
so many different things. So we're going to cover all these different things. I guess some people might call you local Edmonton hero of the music scene. So I'm going to ask you some questions about that. But right now,
Sure.
You look like so comfortably set with, a nice mic setup, but like right square in the middle of a living room, it looks like, as your setup almost. Are you sitting at home in your beautifully decorated?
This is, our whole house is essentially just one art zone. So sort of have a studio and a photo studio. And I've got, of course, as everyone should have, a flute that I'm now learning to play. So,
a Yaz flute? Is that a
Yaz
Yaz
flute.
flute? So then you're obviously
yeah.
partnered up with somebody, Kim,
Yes.
who shares a temperament for just letting the shit sit around everywhere as you work, because that's the easy way to work. Is that a fair assumption?
I think both of us go crazy, in our own ways about having clutter and fight back against that. She was actually cleaning this morning. She has her own
appropriate
things though
timing.
that she's obsessed with. So like clothes, and also has a little studio upstairs here, one of the rooms, plus has her own studio elsewhere. That is like where she does lots of costume designs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's great.
yeah,
I only ask
sort of
because
worked out.
I'm partnered up with somebody who would have none of it. Like, I remember years of coming back at like 3 a.m. after like playing the last closing time of gigs and carrying my shit in and having to take it down to the basement and put it in its right place. And there was almost anyhow. So, we worked through what we worked through, right? But that's okay. So you're right here. Go ahead.
We actually have just one point on that. We have a sort of spoken rule that we will get the shit sort of sorted, but we have a little bit of a buffer zone. So if either one of us is sort of having a bad day and just don't want to deal with it, then we don't get on each other about it.
Yeah.
So if there's stuff lying around, mine or hers, it will get dealt with eventually. But we just sort of have this like buffer zone built into the marriage. That is helpful.
You gotta, right?
Yeah.
Like that's how we keep it going. So I'm excited to have a conversation with you. I remember when I was first evolving my idea for this with Chris Winters, he actually was the first guy who very quickly said your name, and he's like, Lyle is going to have some good stories, good conversation. And I was like, yeah, of course he is. And I've intersected with you a number of times in my life, in history, in the biz around Edmonton and beyond. So this is great. So you've got like a long history, bud. Like you've got one of the longest histories of people I'm going to get to talk to. You know, your first band that was a real pretty big takeoff band. I mean, that goes all the way back to 92, I think, when that takes off with Molly's Reach, right?
Yeah.
And so you've got like, besides all the other things that you've done, like musically, you've got like 5 significant projects that have, you know, gained traction in their own way, one way or another, enough to get on the web and survive. That's fair to say.
I mean, I feel like I'm still a guy in the trenches, and I feel like quite often I'm still sort of an unknown entity, or at least I don't ever assume that anyone would know who I am.
That's kind of interesting.
The bands that I've been
in
are pretty disparate. So it pulls from, you know, fans of one band may not be a fan of one of the other bands that I've been in. So you just never know which band is resonating with someone. And yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you about that part too, and we'll get in there, because like these aren't just sort of logical progression steps. Like you seem to take like big leaps right or left, and sometimes they're with new people, which would be understandable, and quite often you're taking the same people with you. But so out of these groups, there's a whole bunch of overlap, and like you said, sort of disparate stylistic endeavors as well, to which, you know, I'm curious sometimes how much your involvement is in pushing those, or whether you were brought in. But maybe we could start with, sometimes I draw people's timeline out on my conversations like this, but because there's this overlap that I'm probably going to get really wrong a couple of times, I thought maybe I would let you just give me the high flying, you know, I was doing this, and then Molly's Reach was the first thing maybe that started to take off. And now, you know, up to, you know, where the Wet Secrets left off maybe, or if there's other things, you could sort of give me that high flying timeline.
Yeah.
Is that cool?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, to me, it's not that the projects that I've done aren't really that. There's a through line for everything, and it makes sense to me. When I look back at it, it may be baffling for other people, and just also focusing on a ton of different things. Like in the last, I've always had a camera, but just in the last 10 years, just really going down that rabbit hole and obsessively, you know, focusing on photo and video work. So, which is kind of one of the main things now, graphic design as well. So we'll back it up. So the first band that really maybe had any impact was Molly's Reach. I'm actually about to turn 54 tomorrow.
Oh, then we're the same age. Are you in 1970? Yeah. You're a 1970
70,
kid then.
71. So maybe it's
71.
53. Okay. Man, this is embarrassing that I don't even know how old I am. Anyway, yeah. So my birthday is actually tomorrow, which is kind of fun.
Oh, holy shit! Happy birthday, bud! That's fantastic.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm spending my birthday with Chris Winters. I'm gonna shoot the Captain Tractor show with him.
Oh,
so that's tomorrow.
That's perfect. That's beautiful.
So anyway, back to the early '90s. Met these guys. I went to U of A briefly, and then got playing in bands, and it was just a magical thing to me. So the first band, Molly's Reach, was very much in a sort of teenage fan club, Sloan sort of power pop vibe.
Yeah.
And we did that for quite a while, like basically till about 1999. There were other bands sort of going at the time, like one never seemed like enough. There was always other fun things to do, like something a little heavier. I also always liked so much different styles of music and like really broad interests musically. So to me, it wasn't that weird to like both, like Pentangle and, I don't know, Caius or something like that, you know? So there's like, and indie rock, I don't know. There was tons of stuff like that. As I sort of went on, there were, you know, sort of expanding it. There was Slow Fresh Oil, which was Gravy, myself, and Brent Oliver, kind of doing indie rock. And that was almost, it started as a songwriting experiment. Just, we had time at CGSR and we'd just go in and spontaneously write random stuff. So it's like, it's truly all over the map. That kind of morphed into the 2-piece Whitey Houston, which was way heavier. That was like turning the distortion way up. So that was just a bass and drum project with Gravy. So this is now around 2000. Whitey actually did fairly well. We went on, put out a record, went on a ton of tours. This actually got me connected with Six Shooter. This is our first intro to Six Shooter, was meeting Shauna in Toronto in probably 2004 or so, something like that.
Okay.
And they became our managers. They have on and off. I have put
for
records
Whitey?
out on. So yeah, for Whitey.
Okay.
Around that time, it gets a little blurry because the Wet Secrets also started, which was, in my mind, we were going to be Sexy Devo. Was the idea, maybe, like, not, although Devo is sexy Devo. So kind of an art rock band. It just was absurd. Without none of these, everything that I've done, there was no intention of it lasting more than a few shows, you know, or like playing locally. So a lot of this stuff ended up being, it can be obtuse and weird and obscene. Some of it is fairly obscene, and you don't, I don't care, because I just never thought that I'd have to explain this to parents or border crossing guards, like what the band name is and what we do.
Yeah.
And a thing again, like with the Devo comparison or Ween or something like that, like we wanted it to be absurd. We got, for the Wet Secrets, it was kind of a little bit disco and a little bit, punk rock, I guess, an intersection of that. And then Trevor's mom, who actually lived in Red Deer, and Trevor grew up in Red Deer, Trevor being the drummer, Trevor Anderson, also filmmaker from Edmonton, who now lives in Toronto and Montreal.
Cool.
Yeah, his mom found the Red Deer Royals were getting rid of their old outfits from the 70s. So she got us this insane deal, and we actually just pulled these out. Wet Secrets are going to be playing again this summer for the first time in 8 years, I think. So
wow.
Yeah, and
so the
and
Red
again,
Deer Royals being a marching band back when they would
right.
have organized marching bands.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. And it's that pure sort of 70s look that when you think of, you envision marching bands of the 70s and 80s. It's that the huge hats and big sort of epaulettes and fancy dress. So that, again, it seemed like slightly absurd, but we rolled with it.
Yeah.
It also takes away, like, it is a bit of a costume, but we always sort of viewed it that we were a bit of a gang, gang mentality.
Yeah.
And it allows you to slip into a persona a little bit. And
for sure.
You also don't have to worry about the age-old question, like, what are we wearing tonight? Like,
exactly.
It was a known thing, and was a lot of fun. That band also got to travel a ton and played a ton of amazing shows sort of around the world. So made 3-4 records, I guess. So,
but in the middle of that was also Shout Out.
Yes,
I think I said 4 of them in there. So
that's
so there was that overlap.
Back to not thinking it out in advance that you're gonna need to explain this name to your parents or grandparents, whatever, with a cockeyed look when you tell them what your band is called. So that was another thing. We more Edmonton sort of classic players and guys that I had known. Nick, I actually knew Nick when he was just a little kid, like 8 years old. Yeah, baby Nick was. I had mutual friends. A guy that I originally learned to play guitar with when I was in high school was friends with Nick's dad, Wilf. So I would see Nick running around when he was like 7. This little kid just like booting around.
We're talking about Nick Koza, by the way, for listeners, who's kind of a well-known Edmonton guy, especially for his electronic, maybe dance electronic. I'm not sure I'll get the genre or subgenres right, but even Normal's Welcome and the label that put a lot of stuff out for a while. So
absolutely. And he's still, he's still recording. He works as a producer and has leaned largely into mastering. as well. But right now he's recording the latest Homefront record.
Okay.
Homefront also has the connection where Clint was one of the drummers in Shout Out 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 as well. So sort of a little full circle there. Anyway,
Clint Frazier, who is also the older brother of Emma, who is in the Wet Secrets.
That's right.
All kinds of circles here. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are sort of through lines with people that end up being involved, and it was Emma had known Kristen. We were looking for an extra horn player to originally just replace Paul. This is in Wet Secrets again. To come out for a few dates on the road, but as soon as we got him in the band, it was just like another little magic moment, and convinced him to sort of join full time. So that was sort of I think the classic, truly gelled lineup when we were
I'd
six
agree.
piece.
I would agree.
Yeah, and I had been on a tour with the band Veal, where we were opening, and Nick Kozub was actually the bass player, the third bass player in the Veal's history.
Yeah.
On the way back, we had discussed, just because we were both really into synthesizers, I had been collecting synths and kind of using them in more of a punk rock way, like Six Finger Satellite, maybe that vibe with Slow Fresh Oil. Anyway, Nick was sort of putting this new band together. He had a project, and so conscripted Gravy and I to be in Shout Out 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 Out, what became Shout Out 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 Out, which was sort of a dance rock, crazy dance rock band that just passed the 20-year mark as well last year, which seems crazy to me, but originally Gravy wasn't quite sure that he wanted to do that, so it was not going to be a 2-drummer band. It was just going to be Gravy, but he was sort of waffling on it. And Clint found out about this project. Clint was only 17 at the time, but excitedly called Nick and said he wanted to play drums. And that sort of like Gravy then sort of, he recanted and stayed in the band. So we just, at that point, we're like, okay, we're going to have 2 drummers, which was a financial disaster. But it was really fit the bombast of that band.
Nobody cares about logistics.
Kind of monumental. Yeah. No, it's another thing, kind of like the name. The name has grown on me, but if you're thinking that you're going to be making an international push, you might rethink some of these decisions. But at the time, it was again just going to be another fun, regionally locked band doing something a little bit different. There's still a through line, like the stuff that we were listening to at the time would have been like At End to X and The Rapture, DFA bands were all kind of going at that time, LCD Sound Systems. So that kind of stuff right off the hop, which was, I guess, dance punk, Chick, and the Juan McLean, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that was sort of maybe where that was coming from, but it still to me was punk rock in a way, pretty bombastic, fuzzy bass and a pile of synthesizers, which I also loved. So yeah.
I mean, how can we tell that story though, jumping all over the place, right? Like there's just, again, the overlap and trying to find the through lines. So I'm gonna drag back a bit and then try to pull some things out. So let's go all the way back to Molly's Reach. I've had a couple conversations here with people whose bands were taking off in the 90s and what that 90s scene was in Canada and even in the world, and how especially, I mean, it's kind of the rise of indie rock, I feel, kind of right underneath what was happening right in with Seattle and all the shit in the 90s. Like underneath that was essentially creating this, I think, a real hotbed just for indie rock and people to feel like we have a place and an opportunity and let's just keep going, and people are noticing that scene. So you said, like, you described it as like a power pop kind of band, which in the Sloan vein, which there was like that stuff was all over Much Music in Canada. I keep thinking, like, I used to go see Treble Charger and the Killjoys. It's like they toured together every year, at least once a year. They would show up here and play the Rev or play the Rebar or someplace. So it was all over the place. You guys fit in with that, and to the point where you even get the label deal with BMG, who at that time was one of the top, I think there were 4 considered major labels back at that time in the 90s. So that would have been one of them with their international reach, right?
Yeah.
So what does that look like? Like what is that? Are you guys, is that this stereo? I guess my big question, Lyle, is like, was all those cliche things happening for you guys? Like you're in your 20s, this stuff is happening. It feels like this is it. This is how this whole dream happens.
You know, it sort of felt that way. It was never that meteoric of a rise. I feel like there was more of a, I was more mentally prepared for it when Shoutout took off. That felt more like, okay, this is the one. Let's go. Okay. I was already prepped for disappointment. And then when that began to take off, I was like, okay, I've been working hard. Let's roll with this. So I didn't take it for granted the second time around. That's for sure. With Molly's Reach, it was still, I mean, this is like proto internet days.
Yep.
So, and it's sort of the last of the regional bands, like you're talking about, last of the regional scenes. I sort of look at the Smalls as being one of the last of the truly like regional, phenomenons.
Yeah.
I remember seeing them in Toronto and it was nothing like seeing them in Edmonton or Winnipeg or something like that. Like up to about Winnipeg, they were enormous and would play these like huge, packed 1,000-person rager events. And then seeing them in Toronto, it seemed like, not that it was empty, but it was just not the fervor that they had out west. Anyway, my point being, we were also sort of that way. There was definitely a regional scene, and we were pretty locked into that kind of music. Like at that point, we were sort of living and breathing that, sort of pop punk. Yeah, I wouldn't even say punk, like sort of indie rock vibe all the time, and we got to do lots of fun stuff. The label was actually a smaller label with a BMG deal, so it never felt like we got the full wine and dine from the industry. I mean, there were it was pretty fun to get to go to, I mean, to get the first taste of that side of the industry. Even being from Edmonton, it always felt like you're going uphill when you get to Toronto. Like Toronto seemed like the
100%.
The where you want to be based if you're going to be doing music in Canada, and probably still is. I've just always loved. I never felt the pull to move away. I've always preferred
that's on my list of questions
west,
to ask you,
yeah.
Lyle. Actually, I'm glad you actually brought that up. I mean, with all of the bands you've been in, and in most of them sort of really dipping their toes in what does the next level bumping up to, and the Toronto question, if you're from Edmonton, always comes in pretty quickly. And I've wondered how often or how strongly that suggestion or that pull even from within yourself was, and you sort of half answered it there, but if you could explain more.
We had seriously considered moving a few times. The one that maybe was most close was Shoutout. Spent quite a bit of time, and by that time we were also pretty heavily involved with Six Shooter. The distribution deal for Normal's Welcome, which we were talking about, which is the label, the little indie label that Jason and Nick ran, who were the main guys in Shoutout, were distributed through Six Shooter. So it kind of made sense to move there. We spent a lot of time in Toronto, but at that time, I think everybody had other projects that were still kind of going simultaneously. Whenever there was a dip in Shoutout activity, I would be doing Wet Secrets. Whitey Houston was still touring that whole time. So it was like one South by Southwest that I went to, and I was so excited because it was like Shoutout right in the heyday of Shoutout, like playing Fader Fort and that kind of thing. And Wet Secrets also had shows, and Whitey had shows. And there might have even been a Whitsun Days show, as another band that I was playing in at the time. So it was like one of Paul's bands. But it was too much. It was like, it was insanity. It was like how to not have any fun on the road, trying to juggle like four bands and like running around. Anyway, we always had, everyone had like multiple reasons to stay in Edmonton at that time. Had a house here. I had bought a house here. I'd had a couple properties, so it just made sense to actually get out and truly move to Toronto. Even at that time, Toronto's had already seemed prohibitively expensive. Yeah. And now it's gone through the roof. Like to get a house like I have, I'm 10 minutes from downtown in a like 100-year-old house. with, as we were talking about before, the full art zone. So I record here, do everything here. You know, I don't know. We jam in the basement. To get that in Toronto just seems like the impossible dream at this point.
And you mentioned you have all kinds of reasons to stay. I'm curious what your perspective was on, is moving there actually gonna pay off, maybe, is the question. Because my observations when the question came up for me and for my band, and besides the reasons to stay, I already had a family, that my observations were how many Edmonton and Western Canadian bands had gone out there and kind of disappeared. Like the same way you described the live music effect of regional bands and what was happening with Molly's Reach, and then they get out to Toronto. You know, I observed artists that had already moved, and then I felt like they just became like an average size fish in a way bigger ocean, and things took longer to get traction. And I was like, I don't know if I want that either. I'm wondering what your observation on what you saw, because you had a lot of friends, I'm sure, who were going back and forth.
Yeah. I mean, definitely there were waves where in the 90s, almost everybody, I mean, not universally, but Vancouver was the big draw for quite a while. Tons of Edmonton bands all moved to Vancouver.
Yeah, easier for sure.
And most of them sort of dropped off the radar. I think quite often the move was you bring your band, you're excited to move to a new town. Your band ends up breaking up, but now you're working in this bigger scene.
Yeah.
So it would happen in Vancouver, and then later on in Toronto and Montreal. Like by 2005, everyone's making the move to Montreal. That was the
Arcade Fire.
Yeah,
the Arcade Fire secret.
yeah. I think
it had a real scene. It had a scene. It was a good scene for sure.
It had a scene and still does. And I love that town. I mean, I love all of these places. I really love going to visit and play. And and Shoutout actually spent a lot of time in Toronto and staying there for extended periods with maybe the intent of moving. I think Nick was the closest to actually pulling the trigger and doing it and actually moving there. And that might have changed how everything went. It would have either fallen apart or everyone follow.
Yeah.
As it turned out, I think that by the time we were seriously considering moving as well, we were already, like, Shoutout had a great agent in the States and in Canada. Right off the bat, we had Rob Ziffarelli. And we were getting offers. I remember seeing offers and like kind of rubbing my eyes because it looked like there was one too many zeros on the end. I'm like, wow, what? Like no one's gonna pay us that amount. And we would get these crazy offers. So at that time, it felt like it was viable to just stay in Edmonton and do it. We were never set either. So there would be humbling shows. We'd go and play Toronto, and we did like a 2-nighter at Lee's Palace and like sold out Lee's Palace 2 in a row. And we're like, all right, here we go. And then go play Buffalo the next night to like 10 people. And be like,
feels
no,
like
we're not going yet.
This is the tragically hip curse in Canada, right? Like,
sure.
Same thing, like cross the border and nothing.
It's comical to me that like the border, this like fake line in the air matters. Like you're so close to Toronto when you're in Buffalo.
Yeah.
You're way closer to Toronto than you are to Edmonton. We did really well in Edmonton and across Canada at that time. Shoutout was doing great in Canada. And even Buffalo, something like right across the border, just sort of no dice.
Yeah.
I mean, I shouldn't say no dice, but it was like we would, it was always a hit and miss in the States. Sometimes we'd have like absolutely dynamite shows and go to the next town and it'd be like a graveyard.
But I mean, at least the big difference is the next town is an hour and a half drive, not 8 hours, which is the thing that kills you in Canada, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit of to me, it's like a Canadian badge of honor to do that drive around the Great Lakes drive. Yeah,
the Thunder Bay, the Sioux and Sudbury. Stay at the townhouse.
Yeah. Stay at the townhouse. eat at the Hoyto. Then go to go through Wawa. Stay at the little log cabins in Wawa. All these
venues closing down. Does it feel, because we're the same age, so we can talk like grumpy old men on our lawn, but does it feel like the kids right now are missing something by not getting that rite of passage anymore?
Well, I mean, everything has shifted. I mean, at that time, especially in the '90s when we first started going, kind of pre-internet or proto-internet. Anyway, you really had the whole touring plan was to go out, hit a market, and then come back and build on that draw. And it was just by continually hitting this,
Had to keep going
a
back and
town
keep going
every
back.
2 months. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're going to build a draw that way. Now nobody looks at it that way as a viable strategy to build a career. You're online. You build a presence online first.
Yeah.
I mean, this is.
And I'm being
this is a bit of
nostalgic
a
about something
moment.
that we all fucking hated. Like, if I'm being honest, right? Like, it killed us to make those drives.
I kind of loved it. I'm a
Did
weirdo
you?
that I did most of the driving. I was also the main driver. So did Gravy. So it was mostly Gravy and me driving.
Yeah.
But I actually liked doing the driving, and I loved the scenery and all of those drives. I mean, later on we would do the shortcut, so we'd go over to Winnipeg and then down Minneapolis and
Chicago.
then around Chicago.
And up.
So we did that sort of all the way over to New York with Shout Out and with Wet Secrets a bunch of times. That was sort of
That's the beauty.
the route. And that was really good. But I've still always liked that drive around the Great Lakes. It wasn't that long ago that we did that I have done that drive. It's maybe been 5 years, but not that long ago. Yeah.
Okay. And I think it's great you referenced, a couple of the bands had the same thing going, but and so I'm going to be sort of like, I'm going to break it down real quick for anybody who's listening, because you and I might just be comfortable jumping between all of these things. But so, Molly's Reach very much, I think, in the pocket of things that were getting attention, which is, especially out east, and it was much music was kind of king. So that was also part of Toronto, and you're in that pocket of that pop indie rock stuff. So that has that, obviously, that pull and that draw, and it overlaps with you doing Slow Fresh Oil, which was sort of just a local regional experiment. But then you clearly were getting a lot of attention, or at least opening slots with bands that were a bit heavier and starting to get pulled around to that. Like you said, you start Whitey Houston, that two-man band thing, and there's been a few iterations in Canada. For some reason, I feel like that is always just the presence of a loud two-person band has always done pretty well, right up to Japandroids and I mean, even look at Misha and the Spanks right now down in Calgary. Misha's killing it and keeping her career growing, and it's awesome. They have that two-person sound, a bit heavier, and then the 2000 rolls around and you start the Wet Secrets, and like you said, it was this Devo disco indie blender of performance rock even, and then you have this complete sidestep with your friends who love just the same intersection of these synthesizer heavy dance electro shout outs. There's through lines in your relationships with all of them. Clearly there's and the people that were involved that would pull you in, and there's through lines with some of the larger opportunities in the places that you were going and the people that you met along the way in the business. I'm just curious for you, Lyle, the through line stylistically, the way that you play, most of the time it feels that I've seen you playing a bass. Sometimes it's a guitar. Sometimes your bass just sounds like a guitar. The way that you sing and even produce your vocal very specifically, and those choices that you've obviously developed. What was your personal through line stylistically, all these choices?
Well, every one of the bands that I've been in, especially if I'm playing bass, which is mostly, what I've been doing and what I've been certainly known for. In Molly's Reach, I actually played guitar. After that, sort of would switch back and forth, and then basically to bass, but it's like that skronky sort of post-punk bass tone, a P bass into a cranked Trainer amp is essentially it, with or without a Sovtech Big Muff on there. But every band that I was in is sort of revolves around that tonally to some degree. Even Shout Out had, a bunch of bass players. I was sort of like, I would do, if Will was playing like more of a lower kind of disco-y bass thing, I would be doing something up high, adding something, again, using that tonally kind of really crispy tone. Obviously I didn't sing in Shout Out, but this is what I say. To me, there was like very much a through line it was still coming from the same place sort of in my mind. It's just what surrounds all that thing. So in the case of Shout Out, there's like lush synthesizers as well. As we got better at producing ourselves too, and got more gear and familiar with it, more from an electronic point of view. It was actually great for my brain because Nick opened me up to so much music. Like I was pretty insular in the 90s, like wanting just like sort of that pop and like punk rock to some degree, but indie rock. And then going with Nick would play all kinds of stuff on he would make mixtapes for the road that would be like remixed to Ignition, and there'd be like booty bass tracks, and we listened to Aqua all the time, and Clint and I sort of would listen to Aqua while we're driving, much to Gravy's chagrin, I don't know, Giorgio Moroder and this sort of thing. So it was all over the map, and it really opened my mind as well. Like I like to really dig into other forms of music and go at these festivals to all kinds of stuff, like music that I probably normally wouldn't go to, and just really lean in. Anyway, yeah, that was a bit of an aside.
No, that wasn't totally an aside.
Remember.
I was asking about your stylistic through lines to the choices. I mean,
yeah. So it's sort of at the core, there's still this like fuzzy, crispy bass sound, and then we're beginning to drape it in other things. So it was like 303, bought a 303, and like getting into like programming acid bass lines and stuff like that. And adding other things to the mix. It's like
were you always starting these bands, or were there some of them that you were brought into, or is I think there's a real difference. I'm curious about how you end up in a band.
Well, the main ones that we're talking about here right now, I started in a way, I guess. Shout Out was definitely Nick and Jason's sort of main thing, but Nick and I had already talked about while we were on that previously mentioned tour about he wanted to start this new thing that was all synthesizers, and I even at that point I had a pile of vintage synths. We were actually just talking about this. The beginning of that band was actually getting together to try and make a soundtrack for a climbing video that his sister and brother-in-law were making. They have a company that makes like climbing holds and stuff like that. So the very first thing that we did, what started Shout Out, was making electronic tracks, like kind of proto Shout Out tracks for this video, a corporate video for their company. Okay. That I don't think I had actually forgotten about this. We were just talking about this a month ago. That never got completed, as far as I know. But that was the songs. I do remember now having done that, made these songs in his basement in the early 2000s. So yeah,
well, that's pretty fun.
But I mean,
well, what the other interesting Shout Out sidebar for me, one of my favorite moments for you guys around here, and I had to do a bunch of digging to go and dig it back up, was when you were contacted by this group from Vancouver that had this TELUS funding to do this Playground series. And I mean, that was back in the day when a lot of these like video sort of production companies were creating the series of the different live versions of artists coming in. And so they had that TELUS funding called Playground. One of my best friend, Greg, was one of the video directors. There was two Gregs and some other people. Anyhow, and they came here to put on that live thing and connected with you. And you, in that, I remember somewhere in White Ave, Strathcona area, and that crazy video that you wrote the song for. I had to really dig to go and find it because I couldn't remember, but that was an incredible experience. Yeah. That was pretty wild.
Z. Yeah. I mean, I remember that. Yeah, that was great. We wanted it again to be the thing we keep coming back to is bombastic. So Shout Out was already somewhat of a bombastic band where the gear was almost part of the show, like big towering piles of synthesizers and two drummers. So we just thought like what would make it even more the next level is having like a whole orchestra of people playing toms and another like. I brought in all my like modular synth racks. So it's actually Jamie and Wilf. So Nick's dad, Wilf, who are Wilford Ann and the Grown Men. They're in the back. They're playing all the burbling synths in the back. And we had these sections. So
he became the face of it, I think, with that, You guys brought in that super vintage one that looks like, like that standing thing with all the knobs and the wires moving around. I can't remember the name of it, but they had him on that, and it looked like the crazy old mad scientist because he had the long white hair. It was pretty awesome. Quick
Still
summary
have that
for
sucker. It's right
Oh,
beside
do
me
you?
here.
Oh, that's a beauty. Yeah, so I mean, people should Google this. I think I found it by remembering the name of the production company, Artaban, Artaban, and then Playground, and they can find this thing because it's still on their Vimeo. It was an incredible endeavor. That was probably one of the most creative things I had been around in the last 25 years, to try in 2 days to pull off this live audience involvement. You guys went and rented and found 60 floor toms from around the city, and then people were going to somehow be taught how to play them in sync together.
Yeah.
And clap wood blocks and sing and the whole crap.
It actually, wild. It took me, I made those, I like cut and sanded all the wood blocks thinking, this will take me, an hour, but it ended up taking me like all day to make whatever it was, 60, so 120 blocks to clap together. It took me a long time, and painting them all. I was like, but I mean, it was kind of a labor of love. And this is part of the thing. We wanted to do stuff like that here. Not that it necessarily really matters that it was done in Edmonton, but I like the fact that there's something that I like about the idea that you don't have to move away to do stuff. I mean, by the time that was going on too, it's that's in essentially modern times where you don't need to be, you can be from anywhere and your music can be out anywhere. There's no reason, you don't really have to move.
Well, Lyle,
I build a community here.
I mean, I've spent a lot of the last 15 years of my life with that moniker title, being involved in different arts boards and different things, and trying to be such a strong advocate for you don't have to move away, which is why I love talking to people with careers out of Western Canada about the pull to Toronto or not. I love hearing you say that. I mean, you should know you were a huge influence on me at that time as well, for two reasons. Nice. One was for that reason. The fact that you seem so committed to just staying and building success regionally or however. But I mean, the other part was, I mean, you've referenced a couple of times of how bombastic a bunch of these things that you've done, they're hard to explain, names and song titles and all the shit to border guards or grandparents and all these things. But that ambition, I think, has so much influence, and I think I have this deep desire for artists currently and people still trying to build their career or keep a career going, to just hear things like that and be reminded that it's too easy, especially on the internet right now. I think you can tell me if you agree, but to just think it's just like, I just need to write a song and then that song just has to go viral, or there's something about it that people will love, or that it's so much more, that the uniforms and the performance art with the Wet Secrets that I saw. And I even felt like, I remember after you guys won the Peak Performance Project and then you released the EP with I Can Swing a Hammer, and I just remember watching you guys and thinking it sounded like you were writing songs that would perform well in these personas and this whole, it was bigger, right? It was bigger. Like the Shout Out thing is just so much bigger. You're taking bigger swings. It's not just about, I'm going to write a really good song. I'm going to build this entire package or brand or whatever you want to call it. Was that like, that's part of your heartbeat and all of these things?
You totally nailed it. To me, the song, I mean, you obviously have to have compelling music, but I always felt that that's like one part, definitely the main thing. You can't really necessarily polish a turd, although I also, some would argue, I've had a career as a turd polisher. But the idea of like how you're going to present it, and in a way it's better to be polarizing, like doing something that if you buy into it, you're all in, you can get behind it. If that is not cool to you, you're going to like hate it. Like I'd rather have that reaction, like trying to always think of it from an artistic point of view and how it will stand out, how you can have an edge other than just aside from the musical point of view. So that sort of bombastic thing always played into the equation.
And I'm always wondering how many people aren't doing it just because it's so much fucking work. Like you said, I spent a whole day cutting wood blocks so we could try to pull off this wild idea of crowd participation music video. I mean, I just know so many people, it feels like I might be prejudging. It just feels like a lot of people just wouldn't think it's worth it, right? That's like, there's no value in it unless you see the value in it.
Yeah. Oh man. So there are more examples of this kind of thing. Like the video for Coming Home. This is shout out video with Cadence Weapon as well.
Okay. Yeah.
The song is called Coming Home. But if you look in it, we're on fire and the synthesizers are burning. But I stayed up. It took me a week to make exact replicas of our synths. And like $1,000 buying like fake like knobs from like Small Bear and hot gluing it. Like Kim also helped me because we were desperate. We pulled basically an all-nighter gluing all these knobs, and I silk screened the panels. So when you see those synthesizers burning, they look really authentic. Like they're modular synths all patched in, and they're on fire. And I mean, we did that. We burned those. Those were stooged up synths. So that's the kind of thing. Like in my mind, that'll look super cool.
Yeah.
And that like almost destroyed my mind that week. Same thing. The Wet Secrets video of Floating in the Sky. It's sort of buried towards the end, but the end half of the video, we're on a giant tennis racket. The first half we're actually playing.
Oh yeah.
Metaphysical tennis, as it was. This was sort of the concept. So the whole thing is a metaphor, but in the end, we're actually on an exact replica of the tennis racket that I had.
You built a giant.
I built that in my living room in two halves, and then took it outside and, strung it up with rope. That's another thing. Or building like a 30-foot high marching band outfit for Golden West Music Fest that got lit on fire after we were done playing. So that's in the Hammer video.
That's incredible too.
Yeah, and that was Kristen and I going out there with Kevin Bowman to where they held the festival, and Bowman also helped us build this thing. Took like a couple days. I nearly died falling off the top. I'd had a couple beers, and I actually don't really like pot, but I was convinced to have like one little toot with Bowman before we started this thing. And
before you started building the thing?
Before I had to go up and put the final cladding on the roof, and that was the worst mistake. I almost fell off. Just sort of a miracle. This is like 30 feet up, and I had a circ saw, and as I was cutting, the ladder slipped off the top, but it caught on a nail. It somehow caught on a nail, and I was able to like hold on, and I didn't
Chevy
fall
Chase,
off. It was like
National Lampoon kind of coincidence.
It was one of those moments. I came down. I was like, I had to take like a 20-minute break. I was like so shaky. I was like, sort of saw my life flash before me there.
A couple beers and a toot, and I'm going to take a saw 3 stories up and have at her.
Even before I was doing that, I'm like, this is dumb. What am I doing? So I knew better. Again, as you get older, I think like your mortality sort of looms larger, and I don't think I would do that again. But anyway, going that kind of distance, like also building the lights, like shout out. We have the shout lights. So this is another thing. I'm like, what would be another bombastic thing that we could do is like build these lights and then have the lighting controller guy have control over each of the things. So it was like shout and then out.
I was running those lights during that video for Playground. That was my job.
Right. Okay. There you go.
It's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Sweet setup.
Yeah. And sort of pulsing them. Those are downstairs in my basement, awaiting whenever we have the 20th anniversary show, which was in very typical shout out fashion. We are late for our 20th anniversary show as well. It was supposed to happen in the fall, and then Clint was also busy. He's in the band Homefront. They're recording with Nick, as we were talking about. So they're often, we'll get to it at some point, I'm sure. So the cool thing is like all of these bands I've been in, I've been lucky. I think so many bands end up breaking up, like there's an asshole or multiple assholes or like, fractions that break off. I've been really fortunate that all the bands that I've been in, I'm still friends with everybody that was in all of these bands. So shout out, we're all still pals, all the Wet Secrets. Yeah, it's sort of, it's been cool. I want to say it's been a cool ride. I just watched Walk Hard the other night.
Oh yeah, there you go. Well, I mean, that's really, that's a fantastic statement though, because I mean, that happens a lot, and that makes it hard to sustain a career with one band, let alone, a few to five to people that you can play in multiple acts like this over time. I mean, I thought at one point it would be funny, but it's not funny. I thought about it afterwards to just try to make you like ask you on the spot, like which one was your favorite, but I pretty sure you won't answer like which one's your favorite. But maybe the better question is like, because I don't like, sometimes these stay open-ended. This is kind of the curse of Edmonton. It feels like none of the bands officially break up. They just sort of disappear and then come back and play a reunion show. But which one, instead of asking you which is your favorite, which ones felt the hardest to step away from?
Oh boy. Each one has both monumental, like top 10 moments, life moments for me, and also heartbreak moments. So it's sort of hard to know which is which. Again, Shout Out was maybe one where by the time Shout Out really took off, I had already been through the ringer a couple times, like with Molly's Reach and touring with Whitey a bunch, and it just seemed like we were getting up to that next level, and we kind of did it to ourselves. I feel like we had it in the palm of our hands and just didn't maybe work hard enough. There were other factors too, but there were definitely heartbreak moments with Shout Out, and also some of my favorite, like just most monumental shows that I've played, looking out and just kind of being, tickled personally at what I'm witnessing. I don't know. It's
the heartbreaks especially.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's the thing is like the heartbreak. This is different than asking which is your favorite, because I feel like when you think about like the heartbreaks, because you're not solely responsible for those, like you just alluded to, like there's real factors that are coming from within, and then there's outside factors that might also be playing into it. Because the way you describe that just made me think of, my band, the Wheat Pool, in everybody's perception, 2.5 records out, where the trajectory was still like clearly going uphill, and yet we're sitting around Royal Pizza doing this kind of soul-sucking charity gig and asking ourselves, like, are we going back into the next cycle? Because we were talking, because we know what the cycle, it's not just are we going to keep going as a band, it's like the literal, like, I know how much work this is, an 18-month grind again at least, and does anybody really care? You're asking yourself those questions, right? Is the next level really there? I just kind of heard that in the way you answered that question.
Of course. I mean, everyone always wants the trajectory to be up, and you're always looking. I know that I've always been, like eyeballing the next rung up on the ladder, not being thankful that I'm not at the rung below. Like I'm always like, why are we not getting those shows? Or like if we worked a little harder, we'd get that. Later on, I've been able to sort of be more appreciative for what we did accomplish.
Yeah.
With all of these things. I was actually going to ask you had alluded to earlier about making that Toronto jump. Like, did you and Rob almost move? Like, did Weepool ever
talked about it?
Consider Toronto?
Yeah, we did. I mean, obviously I had a family, and I didn't know how that was really going to be possible. But at the same time, it was so important that I wasn't shutting the conversation off, because this was all I ever wanted, right? This is all I ever wanted. And, Rob and Mike were single guys. They had way more flexibility to consider those things, for sure. The brothers, Stefan, our drummer, maybe had a little more set of other considerations with his partner and his career and stuff like that. But we had those conversations, and we felt that pull, and I was trying to get Shauna's attention at 6-shooter. All these things were happening, but I went through it once. I guess the reason I wanted to ask you is, like, you've gone through it 4 or 5 times. You must be an incredible optimist.
I guess I've always felt that I love the process of making music and playing music sort of almost equally, and all the rigmarole bullshit in between. I enjoy it, even like we were talking about the drive, the long drive. All of that stuff is weirdly appealing to me. So I never really had that. I think a lot of people get to a point where they're like, fuck this. like, we're
I'm too
not
old for
making
this
enough.
shit.
I'm too old
Yeah.
for this shit. But I am like, I don't, I feel like I'm still like 21 inside.
Yeah.
My knee will tell me differently every morning. But, you know, I don't know. I still have like, I wake up with tons of musical ideas. I have tons of, I write tons of songs still. I'm like obsessed with like photography as well. Like these things, I feel
Yeah.
like I'm never looking back with and regretting things. There's so much more stuff on the horizon and other little projects that are ongoing and things that I've done that are, you know, still need work.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that sounds, I
Yeah.
mean, I love hearing that. It's so easy to just do the retrospective and like high fly and overlap all of these things. And that's how most people, you even referenced it early when you said, you know, I've been involved in all these things and a lot of them have done really well. And people might not actually know me personally because you've been attached to these other things. But so it's really easy to just look at a music career just based on all of those events and all those things and stuff. And I've tried, you know, you've been really gracious talking a little more about your own personal experience though of like trying to sustain the career and the ups and the downs. I think a big part of it is like how people keep themselves afloat if you haven't hit that place where it's quote unquote what everybody says is like, I'd love to do music as a career. And what they always mean is I would love this to pay my bills and be my job. And that is such a small percentage of people that if they are at it for 30 years like you have been, that's going to be the case. Now, because I did want to talk to you about, you have such an incredible career as a photographer, like your specific art with photography and video. I love it. I find it inspiring. You get I know a lot of people like use you almost exclusively. And I'm sure you were doing that hobbyist into finding now you could charge for it. But you've probably had other jobs along the way to try and keep all this ambition afloat.
Oh, yeah.
I'm curious what that process of your career has been like. What kind of things have you had to do to keep all the ambition going?
I guess there have been other side jobs that I have done and still do. I have painted. I have always done like lots of painting, like industrial painting. I actually also worked with a guy here in town, Dallas Whitley, who's now lives in Vancouver. But we did you know, wallpaper and vinyl wall coverings and hanging those. So we did like casinos and that kind of thing. But I also like that work. Weirdly, like that wasn't like me hating that job. So I still take an occasional painting job because I like it. It's usually, so my wife works for Sabor, the restaurant Sabor. If they're opening up a new restaurant, I will often be the one painting, going in and like masking it off and painting the spraying their big like feature walls and whatnot. So there are things like that I've done all the way along for extra money. At this point, like currently I've been on the road. I have on and off worked for Six Shooter, either as a staffer or so Six Shooter Records, and with all of the bands, maybe not all the bands, but a number of the artists on that label, doing video work and photo work and design work. I have been out in the last little while and with the band The Dead South. And I've also done
Chris Winter's band. Yeah,
he is their manager.
Yeah.
So that is currently the thing that like again, I get obsessive about this. Like I want it to be. I definitely in anything that I do, I try not to like phone it in. Like I don't want to work anything that is like if I don't want to be doing it, I'm not going to do it. So this is why I still continue to do the occasional painting job. I actually painted my mom's condo when we were selling it just because instead of hiring someone, which would have been smart at the time, I was like, I can do that. But I don't know, like leaning in and trying to take the best photos, trying to be the best live photographer ever, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that overlaps with what you said, though, like going on the road with the band to be in that role because they want to capture all of that. You know, a lot of people might still be at the place where they're like, I'm too old for that shit because that's still being on the road. And you're clearly not.
I had one little silver tear roll down my cheek when everyone realized that I'm the oldest guy on the tour. Yeah, outside of the driver, the bus driver is
Oh yeah.
was older than me, but yeah, I'm like of the crew, I'm the old guy, old man of the crew. But as I was saying
Yeah.
before, I really don't feel. I don't know. I don't feel. I still feel like a teenager in my
Yeah.
mind, and I'm still as long as I can. I still want to like roll. Like I was getting up and running with those guys. Like everyone in is training to like run a half marathon now, right now, or a 10K.
Mm.
So I was like running, shooting all day and editing, like staying up all night editing
Yeah.
on a couple of occasions because we were out with Corb Lund and the Hurtin Albertans in the UK as well. So staying up, like doing all that, and then staying up till like 3 a.m. with those guys having a beer at a pub or something. So I mean, again, this is why it's certainly not. Some people would see that as work, as like absolutely exhausting work, but all of
Yeah.
that is fun. All
Yeah.
of that is fun to me. And so it is work. It's a lot of work, but I don't ever view it as like, oh, I hate this. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. There are other jobs that would be hell to me that other people I think would love. So for me, that's like a comfortable spot to be in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I mean, I find relatable at this point, especially. I mean, I've been asked a few times, how's your new podcast going with this endeavor, and is it a lot of work? And I'm like, yeah, I have a job with that's like real big boy pants and a family still, and then this takes way more time than I thought it would, and I haven't regretted a second of creating something that you really love and staying up to all hours editing, like you said, and all those things. It's very relatable for me, but
Well,
inspiring
yeah,
to hear someone else say it for sure.
a creative endeavor.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you only do it. Yeah, I mean, you get going on these kind of things. Like starting a podcast isn't easy. It's the same thing as starting a band. If you have any ambition to make it bigger than just taking the occasional show, it takes a ton of work.
Yeah.
I mean, even like that whole thing, how to carve out a, like right at the beginning, I was saying that I'm still a guy in the trench,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
trenches, like I'm still like, I wouldn't say I have, it has ever been easy. Like it's ups and downs the whole way.
Yeah.
Many bands and many different things, like many creative endeavors, but have been able to carve out a little niche anyway that
Yeah.
that works for me, that I'm comfortable in, and I have talents. I also, as I get older, I recognize what my talents are, what my gifts are, and what I'm terrible at.
Yeah.
So yeah, I try and do things that are appropriate for my set of talents, and that's my lane.
Yeah.
Lean into that as much as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the thing. I mean, I guess what I love about hearing that from you is, I already said it, your optimism just in your expression is refreshing. And that having been at it so long on the road, and for you to still feel that way, I find very impressive and inspiring as well. Anyhow, I appreciate all of this, and I appreciate the story, but
I'm glad you say it, because just other people, it seems like madness where you're doing the same thing. Like you're still on the road. Like what the hell?
yeah,
You're
I
still
can get
playing?
that. Like I can, some people, I mean, it's almost like a diss. It might almost make you feel shitty or something. Like, I guess there's different ways to take it, whether it's a backhanded compliment or a observation, or I don't know, but I don't know. I don't know how you seem to not take that personally.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a comfortable spot for me. So
Yeah.
and I love it, again, like leaning in and just never trying to just phone it in, like always trying to learn. Every day I feel like I'm learning stuff every day, and there's always something more to know, especially like as you dig deeper into photography and photography techniques, editing techniques, video, how to use the software more efficiently. And there's like always something new to learn. And same thing with musically. Like I've been practicing guitar again, like I was 14, like kind of learning to shred, trying to sweep pick. Like as a 50-year-old, I'm like, oh, I can't do this.
Yeah.
But it's fun. I mean, it's fun. It's like continuing to try and learn the entire way, all the way along. Yeah.
I agree. It's super fun. I appreciate you taking the time out of your
Oh
day to
yeah.
chat with me about your career and life. Inspiration. I know this city has really benefited. I don't know if anybody's bothered to say it to you that way, so I will. I really think Edmonton has really benefited from having you as a primary citizen all this time in the arts, bud. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah,
yeah.
I don't know that I have ever heard that. I mean, you always see these like 40 under 40 lists
Oh,
that
yeah.
I
Ed
have never been
Magazine.
on, but
Yeah.
I want to
Edify.
make a 90 over 90 list, so I'm just waiting, hoping I make it to 90, be on the 90 over 90 list.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we'll
yeah, we'll
see.
see.
We'll see if we get it together. But okay. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for your time. I really
Yeah,
appreciate you
Glenn.
and taking the
Yeah,
time and everything about it. So,
of course, my pleasure. My pleasure. Yeah, it's
okay.
great to electronically see you again. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Lyle. I really appreciate
Yeah,
it, bud. Okay.
yeah. Talk to you again.
Take care.
Bye.
You bet.
Hey, I'm Alexi. Stick around for post fame with me and my dad.
Hi. Good evening. Have you
Hey.
noticed how bright it is now? The
Yeah.
seasons change as we do our podcast, and it used to be in the dark whenever we did this, but
Yeah.
not tonight.
First episodes were my LED lights and my big light in my room, and now it's just my window.
Yeah. And as we plan for whatever we plan for in a second season that we want to do, who knows what it'll be, right?
Yeah.
Anyhow,
It'll be nice to
okay,
have light
you have,
coach.
it will be nice. Okay, you have one exam left. I'm gonna keep this short
Cool.
for you. I'm like so blessed for you still choosing to take the time to do this. So before we start talking about Lyle Bell and the episode, because I was really, really happy with this conversation. I think I told you I want to do some local heroes, some people in my backyard, so to speak, who really I feel have had inspiring versions of careers. Yeah. So before I do that, I want to just tell you one quick story, which was awesome. So at work, I think I'm the oldest guy, and it's it's in digital marketing websites, all that stuff. So, but one of the youngest guys who was an intern, and I think now not an anyhow now he's like going to be full time, but he's this young guy. He's a really cool guy named Josh, and he likes talking about music. Sometimes he showed up once with a crate full of vinyl that he had bought from a guy's garage sale across the street from him, and it was full of like gems, and he didn't know any of them, so we're introducing him to some of these. But he's so great. He's got an open mind. When I got there, I could hear the chatter at the other end of the hall that he was going to take over the Sonos and play music, and I think that's the first time. So at first, of course, I think of some joke about not trusting him with the Sonos. You have to be here a certain number of years or something. Anyhow, I didn't make the joke. The first song he cues up was California Stars by Wilco, which was off the first Wilco and Billy Bragg record called Mermaid Avenue Volume 1, which was one of my favorite Wilco songs ever, which was a song that the Wheat Pool used to play in our encores or any time that we had to, fill extra time, do sound checks. It was one of our favorite songs as a group to cover.
That's so fun.
And yeah, so right off the bat, I was like, okay, gold star for Josh today. But what a pleasant surprise that he.
Yeah.
Anyhow, it was fun
the
fun music day at work for me. That's my story.
Yeah. Loved.
So Lyle Bell, there's all kinds of things I loved in that conversation. He's a funny guy. He's got a fun energy. He always has. He has always amazed me to have so much success with every band that he was in. Just to hear him sort of just talk through that whole thing. But, he said these little golden statements of like, there was lots of reasons to stay here. Whenever we talked about Toronto or trying to move and that big pull for because I think I said in there, like I went through that once. Most people will go through it once
One time.
where your band, your one band that you're in out of all the bands you're in finally hits that groove where you're on the cusp of what do we have to do to hit the next level? Is it in Canada? Is it moving to Toronto to be around the industry closer? And he's done it like 3 times, 4 times. I don't know. So I found that fascinating in the way he talked about that he didn't really need to leave. And he didn't. And yeah, I loved that. I loved that part of it.
You just answered my first question.
So I did? What was your question? Shoot, I'm sorry.
Listen, no, not sorry, because that's like the perfect answer. I was gonna say, like, I have them written. I'm not being distracted. But I was gonna ask, like, because I listened to the episode, and there's been other episodes previously where, there's the one or two things that stand out, and then you or I bring them up and we chat about them. But I listened to the episode and I was just like, I finished the episode and I didn't have any like specific point drawn out. And I was like, oh, that was just like a good episode. Like, that was just like fun to listen to. And then you were talking about it and you're like, oh, that was just like a fun conversation. And you came out and you were just talking about like the overall conversation. And I'm like, that's so accurate. But then I was going to ask, like, if there was like a one thing part of like the conversation that like stuck with you after the conversation, or like something you kept thinking about. Yeah, kind of like if there was like one thing that stood out. But I think for you, from what I've gathered from our conversations, is kind of that point is like that he's been so successful in all these different realms. So impressive. But also that, like he 3 times over didn't feel the need to move and was content. But that does go into my second question if you're up to answering it.
I'm so up to answering it. Yeah.
Oh, love it. Okay. Wrote down after listening and listening to you and I's chat and you calling him kind of like a hometown hero and that kind of theme. He has so much art and music that's been produced here. So how does that art music reflect the spirit or vibe of Edmonton is what I was going to ask you. Like, do you think he reflects kind of the art music scene here? Or do you think he's just kind of like a good representation to come out of Edmonton? Or
yeah, that's a really, really good question. So I think there's really 2 levels of answers because you sort of alluded to the vibe. So I think there's a vibe or a spirit or an ethos kind of version of that answer, which is a little different than maybe specifically his art. Like, how does his art reflect Edmonton? So I would have a harder time answering how his art reflects Edmonton, other than I think the fact that it was always being made with his friends and that it was definitely, he was creating things that he just really wanted to do, or that him and his friends just really wanted to create. Well, this goes to the vibe too. So specifically the art, I don't know. Like his photography, I was telling you, his live music photography, he's created a style.
Yeah, I was looking
for
at
himself. It's just like, it's when somebody decides that instead of just trying to know how to do all of the tricks in some version of a discipline, they decide I'm just going to be really good at this one version. I don't have to be all the other versions of a photographer. And that's definitely him, and it's paying off for him. So I guess the only way I could properly answer is his vibe is so Edmonton to me. And I'll explain it this way. I remember, and I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but I've told other people, I sort of never forget, there was one tour in particular where our band was doing the typical Ontario tour where we would fly into Toronto, we would backtrack drive all the way to Windsor, which is on the border with Detroit, across the river. And we would just start going down the 401 highway and make ourselves and try to go all the way to Ottawa and play as many shows in those cities as we could. And because there was way more we could do in a 2-week span than we ever could in Western Canada. And it was one of those, and I had lined up a whole bunch of like press promo, like stopping at the college radio stations. And we were I remember being in Toronto. I remember being in Guelph. I remember at University of Toronto, I should say. But then there was also like this Ryerson, I think, and another guy who was a radio guy. I remember being asked the question multiple times, for some reason on that one tour, of what is your scene like in Edmonton, because they had no idea, right? And they wanted to get a sense of like what represents the scene in Edmonton, what makes it cool. And I answered the same thing every single time, which was that blue collarness of Edmonton compared to places like I felt, and my Calgary friends are going to hate this because it's going to sound like I dissed them, but I was like, I feel like Calgary wants to be Vancouver so often in our music scene, or Vancouver wants to be Toronto. Like there's just that little bit of envy of the bigger center that attracts more things, and rightfully so, like in those cultures that they just kind of want more. They want to be known for what makes them great as a great city the same way. So there's always that step up envy. And I just felt Edmonton never had a step up envy. I felt like we were used to being the northern, isolated, potentially even ignored like community, and that people here didn't make their art like it was their way out. People made their art for art's sake, out of their love, their passion. Some people have joked it's our way to endure the winter, you know,
It's
like
self-sufficient.
yeah. And I feel like his vibe is that he kept making great art for art's sake. And, you know, and it just sort of proved an ethos, proved the vibe true with every single band he was in, which is the way he talked about it. He's like, they would tirelessly work on every little aspect. It had to be more than just writing a song. He wanted to do all of it. And yeah, that's the vibe that I feel like he represents, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great question. It's a really good question, Lexi.
Love it.
It's a good question because to me, the summary of that conversation was me feeling really inspired, I guess, since you asked me what I take away afterwards. I felt very inspired because we're the same age, that he just keeps, like he said at the start and at the end, you know, I'm a guy in the trenches. I'm still in the trenches. But then he would also say, I still feel like I'm 21 inside this body, like with the same energy and aspirations and obviously consistent creative energy coming out of him.
Yeah.
And all that kind of stuff just really appeals and speaks to me personally. So, you know, I don't know about anybody else who will listen, but I know for me it was a cathartic, valuable conversation. So I loved it.
I like that.
I like it too. Well, thank you for listening and coming up with some good questions. I like that.
Oh, it's easy when the podcasts are good.
Yeah, you're sweet. I'm not going to belabor anything. I'm going to let you get back to studying.
Yeah. And then we're done.
And then when we come back, when we come back, then you won't have any of these pressures and it'll be so wonderful.
Yeah,
so
I'll have
wonderful.
light back in my eyes, maybe be a little bit more interesting again.
The light will return to your eyes. That's unbelievable.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep,
okay. Thanks for your time. Appreciate you.
Always.
Love you.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye.